A lot of social media is driven off of likes, comments, and then likes in the comments. So we're always looking for validation outside of ourselves. If enough people like something, then we feel good about what we just did. But we're always looking for validation outside of ourselves. And if you're looking to not seek validation from outside sources, then this is a good video for you to watch. The reason we seek for outside validation so much is because we actually don't validate ourselves. And this may seem very obvious, and it is very obvious because it's a very straightforward answer. We're not actually taught how to validate ourselves all the time. From our very young years in life to going through school and going to college and getting a job, everything is based off of other people. So in school, we're graded and everything is based off what we can do, and then we get a grade. We're always looking for some kind of validation. The harder we work, the more praise we get, the more we're rewarded for the things that we do. And there's nothing wrong with this, but this is the structure in which society works. There's always some kind of incentive, and we're always looking for some kind of outside reinforcer or some kind of prize to win at the end of the day. So we're always doing something, and we're always looking for immediate feedback from people or something. So the main idea is we're always pushed to do something very specific in order for us to get some kind of reward, praise, or like. So we're constantly adjusting what we're doing, what we're talking about, how we act even, in order to get validation from others. So we're not actually doing things we want to do all the time or talking about specific things that we would like to, even though they come natural to us, or we're just interested in certain topics. So we're always hiding ourselves and trying to do something that gets a like, that gets an immediate reaction, gets some kind of good feedback or validation. This is naturally the way we see validation. If you've been through some kind of emotional abuse in the past or you have been manipulated, what happens is your sense of self is actually washed away. As I mentioned before, self-validation is something that is not really taught. We're constantly taught to look for validation outside of ourselves. So when we are abused or manipulated, this is even worse for us because now we learn to trust somebody else and always seek validation in somebody else. So we couple being manipulated and being abused in some kind of way with the way that society is structured, and then we have a hard time validating ourselves. And then this is why we're always looking for some kind of outside validation. The simple answer to not look for validation outside of yourself is to seek that validation within yourself. So now the next step is figuring out how to validate yourself. So now that you understand how and why we look for validation, now I'm going to explain how do you even get to the point where you validate yourself. And it comes with not actually recognizing other people's validation. It's a good thing to be validated. It means you're doing something well. But it's most important when you validate yourself because this is what matters the most, what you think. And this contributes sometimes to our own insecurities because we're always looking for what other people think. But what about what you think? What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want for yourself? Don't you want to think the best things about yourself and the best about what you do and how you do them? When you do this, then insecurity melts away. What matters the most is what you think about everything that you do, not others. Others can tell you that you are great, you're so fantastic, and they can tell you so many things. But if we don't believe it about ourselves, it will never penetrate. We always just think, that's what they think. That's not what I think. People think I'm great, but I don't think I'm great. So instead of looking at that, looking at things from that perspective, you would validate yourself and say, I am great. And so once you believe this, coupled with outside feedback, then you're no longer relying on validation outside of yourself. You're more so validating yourself in a sense where now you are expressing yourself to the fullest potential, and then people are reflecting that. They're not telling you something that is no longer in contradiction with what you think. Everything is matching perfectly. True validation always comes from yourself and yourself first. People can always be in contradiction to what you actually feel. So if you wonder why you always feel bad, this can be one of the reasons. Because the validation must come from yourself. The whole world can tell you something great, but you'll always be in opposition to that. You'll always kind of argue your point as to why you are not the things other people are saying. And if people validate you and it's contradictory to what you think, all it's doing is feeding your ego, because it is a false sense of yourself. that is actually being fed, not you. You'll feel a lot of emptiness as you get compliments, as you get likes, as you get so many rewards for the outer things that you're doing. But if you don't actually feel any of it, if you don't think about this yourself, then ultimately you'll still feel empty. And you can't lie to yourself. You can't escape yourself. You can only distract yourself. And so it is feeding another part of you that's not actually the part that you want to be fed. It's good to receive validation, but it is even better to receive validation from yourself. You can think of yourself in third person, and you can say good things about yourself, like if you were complimenting somebody else, or as if you were complimenting a little child. You wouldn't try to discourage a little child, or you wouldn't try to beat them to the ground. You would be very nice, you would be very gentle with them, because many times we are way too hard on ourselves, and then we cannot validate ourselves. We cannot get to the point where we can motivate ourselves and make ourselves feel better. So it always has to come from the outside. And if people have this much control over you, where you need all of this validation, then ultimately you are not in control of yourself. Do not hold others' opinions and ideas higher than yours. You can see them merely as a reflection, and then you can reflect on the ideas that they give you. It's ultimately up to you to decide what you do with people's validation. Now, to validate yourself means that you put yourself at the highest esteem, whether you do this consciously or not. What you think of yourself matters more than what other people think. In the end, other people's ideas and validations only mean as much as you make them out to be, and so does your own validation. But put your own validation above others and put your esteem higher than what others think. Because if somebody were to make you feel good, that's a good thing. But then somebody can make you feel bad at the same time. And this is where manipulators can come in and then play with your emotions. And this is how we get abused emotionally. Because we allow ourselves to get played and to be taken any which way somebody else wants us to go. So we're constantly changing up. We're constantly changing who we think we are and who we want to be based off what we get from others. But when we can follow ourselves, follow what we would like to do, when we validate ourselves, then we cannot be led astray. Consider yourself the highest opinion, where nobody else can top the idea you have of yourself. It must come from yourself if you suffer from over-relying on others for validation. Because as you do this, you don't need to rely on them. You always have yourself to rely on, because you can never escape yourself. Wherever you go, you must follow. So validate yourself. You'll see that you won't have this sense of emptiness anymore. This simple understanding can help you get to a point where you can think more of your own ideas and opinions, because many times we don't think much of what we think. We only think it means something if somebody else thinks it means something good. But we must get to that point where we just think it's good. We don't need to rely on likes, or we don't need to rely on other people complimenting us. What matters the most always is what we think of ourselves.